like winning and I like seeing progress and change. I think one thing I've realized working at Envoy is that this is the perfect size company for me because I have the ability to manage and work with the team. I have the ability to make change that actually is like impactful and I can see that. And I have visibility to leadership, which I love Envoy's leadership. It's been really great.
Everyone wants to build stronger pipeline, but only a few know how to make it happen. If you're listening to this show, you know outbound is not dead. You just need a little help building a system that actually works. Well, you're in the right place. I'm Todd Busler, and on this show, we're breaking down the plays, processes, and frameworks behind repeatable pipeline growth, straight from the people who built it. Let's get into it. Hey, everyone. Pumped to have Jade Campbell join the show today. If you're a sales leader or manager struggling with getting your reps to do the right behaviors, this episode is for you. She spent the last 5 years at Envoy, building out the SDR team, SMB, AE function, and now runs all mid-market sales. She's worked under a handful of great CROs. She's seen inbound, outbound motion. She went through a COVID up and down. But what I take away from this conversation is she knows how to motivate teams. She knows how to drive the right behavior. And she talks a lot about how that got instilled in her. Where did she learn those habits? And what you should do if you're in a similar position, trying to get your reps to do the right behaviors consistently. Enjoy. Jade, welcome. Excited to have you. I want to hop right into it. I think maybe I'll just start with give the people a quick intro, who you are, what you've been doing at Envoy. I think a lot of people in the SaaS world know Envoy, but maybe some don't. So let's just start with a quick intro and then we'll hop into it.
Okay. So I'm Jade Campbell. I've been with Envoy for almost 6 years. So January 2020 is when I started, right before the COVID madness took over. And I've really been on 2 different main teams since I've been at Envoy. So first 3.5 years, I was on the BDR side, inbound, outbound, and then ran the whole program. And then for the last 2.5 years, I've been managing the SMB segment. So when I took over the team, we were like 6 people, 7 people, and now we're up to 14 reps, and we're going to continue to grow that next year. For those who don't know what Envoy is, we started off as a visitor management platform. So if anyone's ever gone to an onsite and had to sign in at the front desk, that's typically powered by Envoy. Maybe had a nice little selfie as part of that experience. But we've really grown, and I think honestly, COVID forced us to grow as a company. We extended into other areas of the workplace. So we now have an entire workplace platform where you can do desk booking, room booking, get a ton of analytics around how your space is being utilized. We launched emergency notifications recently. So pretty much if it has to do with how people work in your office or how visitors experience your workplace, we help with that.
Love it. One thing that stands out about your background is, like this product marketing kind of positioning type of background, and then a move into BDR leadership, and then, now pure sales leadership. How did your prior roles prepare you for building out the SDR, BDR organization?
Yeah. So I think this is buried in my LinkedIn. So my first 6 years professionally was at a company called Meltwater. And I have to give a lot of credit to like my sales discipline, to my experience at Meltwater, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But I was there for almost 6 years as well, and I had almost a different role every single year. And my last role was managing the sales enablement program. We had like 1 person per geo. So I had been working in the Sydney, Australia office. I ended up doing a lot of product enablement and training for that company and helping with connecting sales like feedback to the product team. And then my job after I left and before I came to Envoy was product marketing. And that's really where I switched back into BDR because I just think the team needed a lot of help on the sales side. But to answer your question, I think when I first started, I worked really closely with marketing. So I was running the inbound BDR team when I first started at Envoy. Honestly, I had never seen a company get as much inbound as Envoy did. Coming from Meltwater, where I was lucky to get like 1 inbound lead every 3 months, and it was usually like spam, to be honest with you. I came here and my team was booking like, per person 45 plus meetings a month, which is insane. So working in lockstep with marketing and like tightening all the screws to make sure nothing was getting missed is kind of what helped me. And I think honestly, I think my past experiences help with like the operational piece of everything. Like, how does this change impact this team? Or if we decide to do this, what are all the different like loose ends that need to get tied together in order to effectively launch whatever initiative or campaign we're doing? Having exposure to different teams helps me like think through that before the change happens. And then hopefully, and not always, but hopefully the change goes better.
Yeah, I think the marketing background like you get certain operational rigor and just like thinking about more like the entire customer journey ends up being great for people moving into sales development and sales leadership and like undervalued in a lot of situations. It's nice being at a company with that much inbound. I think a lot of people in SaaS today are not experiencing that.
Sure.
When you got there and there was a lot of inbound coming in, eventually you went and said, hey, we got to turn on this outbound motion. Walk us through that process. What was your learnings? What was that journey like?
Yeah. So we actually had an outbound team when I started. So I started on the inbound team. And I will say, like, as much as I loved that period of time for Envoy, I think we were in that stage of company where we were getting inbound. And eventually that reaches a certain point where in order to really grow and scale the business, you have to get the outbound motions right to supplement that. And I think we've gone through several forcing functions of that. Like we've been able to ride some of the changes that happened in the workplace from COVID at periodic times. But I think the last 2 years have been a lot more normalized and have required us to lean more heavily into the outbound program, not just for BDRs, but also for AEs. So when I first started, admittedly, like the outbound team, there weren't a lot of like guardrails or processes. There was a lot of like blast emailing. We had this weird ROE where, you know, if an outbound BDR had touched an account within 60 days, I think, even if they came inbound, doesn't matter how many accounts that BDR had been reaching out to, it would count for the outbound team. So I actually had a baby in 2020, my first child. And when I came back, I started like peeling back the layers of that. And I was like, hey, this doesn't seem right. Like, you know, I really want marketing to get credit for what they deserve credit for, because more marketing budget means more sales opportunities on the sales side. I don't think all salespeople realize that, but I firmly believe that. So I think that's where I started poking holes in that and trying to understand like what are the actual outbound motions. And fortunately, it paid off. We actually moved the BDR team on the outbound side to hybrid for a short period of time because we were just so inundated with interest in the market in 2021. And then that kind of set the stage for like resetting some of the expectations on how that team operates going into 2022. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting my ears a little mixed up.
Yeah. What was your experience with the hybrid model? Are you a fan of that?
Oh, this was like a controversial move, I think. And every CRO has a different opinion about this, and I can see both sides. So for us, we launched a product called Desks, which was basically desk booking. And this was right at the height of all these companies being like, we're going to come back to office, but now we've outgrown our workspace. We need to make sure we have a space for everyone. So we had so much inbound that we couldn't support it with the amount of inbound BDRs that we had. So I do think that the shift helped us. Like it was some of our, like the craziest and best times at Envoy were like the 6 months after we made that change. I personally believe that BDRs need to have wins sometimes. So it was also just a great way for them to have like really fruitful conversations and then hopefully take what they learned and adapt that to like other similarly profiled companies. But then we ended up getting another CRO who came in and wanted the two channels more separated, which was fine. I think, you know, we had been doing that for about a year at that point. And then there's always a lot of change management that goes into that. But yeah, I think it depends on the company. I think it depends on the team size. It depends on what the core priorities are. If it's like pipeline at all costs, I think sometimes that can be a good move for you. But if you're really trying to make sure both parts of the org or pipeline funnel are operating the right way, sometimes merging them, people look for the easiest way out typically. So if you get an inbound lead, that's what they're going to go chase.
100%. So you mentioned the early days of the kind of outbound muscle, I'll say a lot of blast emailing, kind of loose rules of engagement, or maybe, not the clearest rules of engagement. What would you say from a like systems process standpoint, you started to mature? Like, how did you approach that? What came first? What were some of the learnings? How did you kind of deal with, hey, you only can make so many changes at a time? Like, how did you approach it?
Yeah, the changes at a time thing. I'm someone who can handle a lot of change. I moved a lot as a kid, and I have to remind myself that not everyone is built that way. And I have learned that over the years that I've been managing. So where did we start? On the operational side, I think I typically try to anchor on lower hanging fruit first. Like, what is the easiest thing we can do that can have the highest impact? So we didn't even have any operations around how to go after closed lost opportunities. And, you know, when I mentioned the inbound and how much inbound we were getting, we had a ton of closed lost data in our database. So operationalizing that, making sure that the team had the right sequences, that those accounts were getting redistributed to new people who were coming onto the team, and that we actually were going after those in a more strategic way. I think that was like a really low hanging fruit, easy win for us. And then because Envoy has so many products and we can sell it to so many different buyer personas, I think a lot of times other people at the company might be like, we just need to land these big accounts. And I'm like, I understand that, but we're also working with people who are just starting their sales career and it's not so straightforward to them. So I think operationalizing and being super specific about like, what product are we pitching? What buyer are we pitching it to? And then teaching them how to prospect and to cold call into that with that specific pitch is really important. Otherwise, there's like a million things they can do. And they're like, where do I start? What's most effective? How do I learn all of this?
I want to dig into this a bit because I think it's one thing that's really interesting. Like most sales leaders I talk to right now are like, hey, the product development cycles are moving really quickly, both internally and the competitive landscape. Like the rate of change is just undoubtedly significantly faster now. And I think on what you mentioned, right? Like facilities, workplace, building operations, a desk product, like that's pretty complex early on, right? So like, how did you approach enabling the reps on that? Like, did you split things out by product line? Did it take a ton of education? Like, hey, this persona cares about this thing. Like, how did you do it?
Yeah. So we started off with persona outreach, and that took a lot of bandwidth to make sure that we had like the right messages and the right content from marketing. And I will say our marketing programs have evolved. So now they're, I would say, one step beyond that, where it's a specific persona, but a more targeted and tailored message that we're going after in a more isolated ICP. Because the reality with Envoy is if you have an office, you can use Envoy. And I think that is really exciting and also really overwhelming for someone who doesn't know where to start. Yeah. And going back to Meltwater, like for those who don't know Meltwater is a PR and media monitoring software. I'm sure that's what it was when I started over 10 years ago. I'm sure they say they're a little something different now, but we had several products. And as a new person at the company, it was my job to learn one product and to really understand the persona for that product and just sell that product. And then once I had done like 6 months of decent sales of that product, then I was able to start learning about our social media product because it was a slightly different buyer. And I try to apply that approach even on my team today with SMB because we also have to generate our own pipeline. We don't have BDRs aside from the inbound team that are generating pipeline for us. So you started with personas. I think if you can work with the marketing team to really get crystal clear on like what your ICP is or maybe where you're winning as a business, and then create a marketing campaign where like there's webinars, there's content on the website, there's ebooks, there's blogs. You can get really tailored on which accounts the team should be going after. The messaging goes in line with that. It's much easier to enable someone on that specific pitch of who to go after and what to say than to be more broad about like, oh, you could go after this buyer persona, but you could try to pitch them every product and then they get overwhelmed. They don't know what to pitch. I think we've elaborated on that approach. And every time we have a new product or we have a very specific campaign that we're running, we try to be extra targeted in who we're sending that message to and what the message is essentially.
What you just described is not easy, especially at a high growth company with a lot of people moving around and you kind of blending like, is this product marketing? Is it demand gen? Is it enablement? The sales leader is doing a lot of the enablement, right? What do you think are some of the parts you like really nailed in that, what I would call like multi-product enablement, multi-product kind of prospecting? What parts do you think you really nailed or like that are good learnings to share with the audience and areas that took you longer to figure out?
I think messaging is always something you're never going to know the answer to. In my personal opinion, I don't know if that's true everywhere, but I think you can have 8 million conversations about how to increase the open rate on a sequence. My philosophy is maybe more old school, but I'm like, give them the tools. And if you hire strong salespeople, they're going to figure it out. So I would say the things I personally am really great at, and I think help the business is the operational piece. So like getting a dashboard and getting all of the reports that the team needs in order to work off of and make sure that I'm holding them accountable to like how many people do they have in sequence each week? How many calls are they making? We can talk more about some of the things I do because it's probably different from other sales leaders. But I think, my philosophy is they have to be on the phone. We can sit here and talk about messaging the entire day, but if we didn't go talk to anyone on the phone, it doesn't matter because we didn't learn anything.
Why do you feel that way? I agree with you. Why do you feel that way?
I'll go back to Meltwater. So just like Meltwater I was a fresh college grad. I didn't know what I was getting into. I remember I got my job offer and my dad was upset that it was a sales role, but I think his stigma of sales was, oh, it's entirely commission based, and he wasn't very familiar with like tech sales. So I ended up starting this job and I grinded. I was like, if I was not in my seat at 9 a.m. making calls, like I was in trouble. And our hours were 9 to 6 in office, 5 days a week. Lunch was from 12 to 1 only. So if you had calls over that block, you were expected to like eat your lunch real fast and then get back out on the floor. And I was a BDR and an AE and I had a monthly quota. Weirdly, we didn't have territories. So that was like an interesting bucket where like we could end up working really large accounts really early on, but it ingrained this like, sales philosophy. And I've had to learn how to make it more digestible for other companies or for like this next generation of sellers. Cause I think that they might push back a little more than we did when we first started in sales. I think I had that work ethic before. Like I did 2 majors. I always took extra classes. I was the captain of a bunch of things but at the same time, I just think that I agree. Like if you're not talking to people, you're not learning anything. So that's something, I think if you ask anyone on my team, they'd be like, oh, Jade has like really high expectations and she's always thinking we can do more. And some days they probably like it. And some days they're like, oh, I wish she would stop caring about this so much. But I give like 120% to everything all the time. So
yeah, you brought it up around the operational piece and accountability. I want to spend a lot of time there. Like I've been lucky enough to get to know you a little bit as a customer and see like the type of ship you run. I really respect how you go about it. And I think it's undervalued, right? Like people can talk about strategy and messaging and what you do, but it's like, look, that accountability and just creating the right sales culture matters a ton, maybe more than all of the other stuff, right? But one thing you said I want to dig into a little bit around, I know the Meltwater like sales culture. I have some people that have worked there. Like it's intense and I think great training ground to be able to lead you to what you're doing and the success you're having. How do you think about that with like the next generation of selling? Like it's a little bit different in terms of how you manage those people, what their expectations are, how you communicate with them. What learnings do you have there?
yeah, I don't have a perfect solution. I'm not going to sit here and say like I hire perfect people. I will say, I think the hiring profile and again, this is something that happened over 10 years ago, that Meltwater had a great hiring profile. We didn't hire people with experience. We hired people who were fresh out of college, but had that grit and that ability to just like, I don't want to say bullshit because that's not the wrong word, but like talk through, like get information and then have a strong output that was good enough to like get you to the next step. We had a group interview. This is like how crazy Meltwater was. Like we had a group interview as our interview process. And then everyone who made it from the group interview did one-on-ones. Like we had to do mock cold calls. And again, we've never done sales. We're like fresh. I think I might've still been in school when I interviewed at Meltwater. When I think about the next generation, I think part of it's like getting the hiring profile right. And it's a little trickier because outbound teams are a lot more prominent now. So there's a lot of people, especially from the AE side, that like typically I'm looking for people who've had sales experience when I'm hiring for my team. But the best feeder talent program for Envoy has been BDR. If we can hire someone in as a strong inbound or outbound BDR, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be super successful when they become AEs at Envoy. So I think hiring is one part. And then I think the rest is this generation of sellers needs to have a lot of trust. You need to have a really trusting relationship with them for them to do what you want them to do. So I think that comes in different layers. Like I think it's fighting their battles sometimes. I would say I'm a manager who fights battles for my team when I think they're worth fighting or I think they deserve to be changed. I will go above and beyond to try to find ways to help. It's end of quarter. I'm doing sales math for each person on my team every single day to see like which deals can we try to give maybe a greater discount to bring in sooner in the quarter, or if we can get these 2 deals in, it means you hit this milestone, whatever the metric is. I think that's one thing. And then I think when I turn on this is what I need from you guys, I think that's more palatable because of all these other things that I'm doing in the background to help the team. Sorry, that was like a long-winded answer.
Not long-winded at all. And it's really interesting because I've probably done like 25 of these podcasts and most people have similar-ish profiles. Some were senior, some were junior, but similar-ish profiles. And like one of the most common and distinct trends is just the best leaders get in the boat. Right? Like you're there with 2 weeks left in the quarter trying to figure this out for them. And then what that means is when you're starting the next quarter and you're like, all right, it's time. This is what we have to do. People listen and they follow you. Right. And I think there's some innate leadership qualities that you probably don't even realize you're doing. That is interesting from my perspective because I see it across all of these conversations. Jade, I want to dig into the accountability piece, right? You mentioned that a lot of this came from likely your early experience of like, hey, this is what it was, right? And you were doing it, you were seeing what great looks like, and you saw people getting promoted. So I'd imagine some of the leadership style comes from how your leaders led teams you were on, some from osmosis, but how else have you like developed that the leadership skills and your leadership style?
I think a lot of it's from experience. It's not here's how to do it. Sometimes it's here's how not to do it and then do the opposite of that. Like I have definitely had some really great leaders that I've worked for or with over the years. I've also had some leaders where I'm like, what is happening? Like, why are we doing this? I feel like we're not on the same page. I don't feel like you're listening to me. So it's a bit of both, I would say. I also, like anytime there's leadership training, I'm the person who's going to volunteer and try to join that. How do I learn the individual strengths of each person on my team and how they like to be managed or work with and adapt that to like how I work with my team? The Gallup Strengths Finder training, I think, was probably like the biggest like eye-opening piece of training for me because it helped me understand myself and also helped me understand people who are like wildly different in terms of their priorities or like what they anchor towards. So I'm actually trying to see if we could do that at Envoy right now because I think we've done it once a couple years ago. But maybe this is bad to say, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts or books. I feel like I'm more of a learn by doing type person.
It's working, whatever's working. You mentioned seeing some of those leaders, some of which you learned a ton from, and they were able to like improve things in a lot of ways, and other leaders that maybe didn't have the outcomes that they had hoped for. Where do you think are like the anti-patterns there? Like at some point, I'd imagine you're going to go and take over a different sales organization. And there's a lot of learnings of seeing CROs that you've seen come in. Like, where do you think they make mistakes? Like, where do you think are the common whiffs?
Yeah, I think it's not getting hands dirty enough to understand the problem. And sometimes it's just like lack of time. But I would argue, I have 2 kids, 5 and under. And thankfully, I have a very loving and supportive husband who's also like a great parent and we can tag team. But like, I go to a bunch of events. I was at an event this week and last week. I join like at least 1 to 2 customer calls every day. I have one-on-ones with 14 direct reports right now. Like, you can find a way to do it. I promise you. I promise you can find a way to do it. So not getting your hands dirty is like a huge problem because then you're making decisions with partial data. And sometimes I think those decisions are to like prove a point and say like, you hired me for a reason. This is why we're doing this. And that doesn't always work out that way. And then I think the other part that I've seen is like not getting your management team to feel like you're fighting the battles for them. I think sometimes when leadership changes, some great leaders come in and it's like, we're going to do this together. Like, what are the biggest problems? I'm going to help you unblock them. And others will be like, everything you're doing is totally wrong. I'm going to change all these things. And in my time at Envoy, like usually that second approach doesn't work. And there's a long game. You have to be patient and kind of see what happens. But eventually that's like what happens. And I think people want to work for people who care about them and want to win. And I try really hard to remember that every day. Like, I want my team to know I care about them and I want to make sure they know I'm doing this because I want them to win, because I also want to win.
Hey listeners, interrupting the podcast for a quick 20 seconds for a Champify plug. If you've been getting value from our content via webinars, podcasts, stuff I write on LinkedIn, I hope you understand that we think about and take pipeline generation very seriously. If you're listening to this podcast, it means you care about figuring out outbound, figuring out how to be more creative to prospect into your top accounts and win more revenue. At Champify, what we do is turn your entire company's existing relationships into new revenue. Champify's AI finds your highest converting revenue opportunities, from former customers at new companies to previously lost deals ready for a re-engagement, and turns them into a repeatable pipeline engine at scale, all within your existing workflows and low learning curve, which means high adoption. We're generating 20% of pipeline for companies like S&P Global and working with some of the largest, fastest growing B2B orgs in the world. If you're interested in what we do, we have a compelling offer for people that are listening to this podcast. We'll go through a data test, we'll go through a closed loss audit, and we'll show you the potential pipeline opportunities you have within your existing systems. Email sales@champify.io and mention this podcast, and we'll present you with a compelling offer. Enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like the way you're describing what you do with your team in terms of blocking, getting things off their plate, fighting the battles. It's like, okay, you want the same thing from your leadership, right? And to be able to do that, they have to have their hands dirty enough to understand which are worth fighting, right? The best CRO I've ever worked for, I was a VP of sales. He came in above me. I was really happy because I feel like I was kind of hitting my end of, all right, I'm not really sure what to do next. And he sat down and he said, okay, what's working? What's not? what are these things on the not working do I need to go fix first? And just trusted that, right? And I was like, okay, this guy's on my team, right? Like, believe me, go help me with these things because I haven't been able to fix them. I'm really happy you're here to fight some of those battles. I can keep the lights on here, right? Like, and it became this like, all right, we're on the same side of the table. I've worked for others where I'm like, you didn't even listen or talk to any customers and you're trying to change things. This is not going to go well, right? So I've had a lot of the same experiences. Talk to me about a big part of the accountability, is performance management. I get the sense with you, Jade, you're not one to shy away from tough conversations, but talk to me about like how you think about and approach performance management and how you approach those tough conversations that I don't know about for you, but I still feel like now after doing this for 12, 15 years, like there's still uncomfortable conversation. They get a little easier, but not much, right? Like, how do you approach it? What have you learned there?
Yeah. I try to be proactive and like do whatever I possibly can to prevent those conversations from having to happen. But the reality is no matter how great of a recruiter you think you are or hiring managers, that just happens. And honestly, sometimes people just have weird life situations that happen that impact their performance at work, and you have to be okay with that. On the performance side, so I try to have like very clear cut standards on my team of like what are the expectations. And some of that falls on things that they have to take accountability for and like present to each other on a weekly basis. And then there are other things that I will set. And I think this has evolved over the last 2 years. To your point of like too much change at once, I've had evolutions of like to where we are today that I think each step has helped me get to where I am today. But I've also acknowledged like as much as I want to think everyone on my team is going to do the job perfectly, most of them have never sold before. And even if you have a more mature team, like sometimes they haven't sold in the same motion that you've sold. Or like, I think there's a lot of sellers out there who've only sold at companies that really relied on inbound. And an inbound sale is totally different than an outbound sale. And that's kind of the evolution of Envoy. The first 3 years was very inbound heavy. And then something changed in the market. And as much as we still get inbound, we have to learn how to sell people and how to get them off competitors or convince them to spend money on something like Envoy. So, and part of that is like, we have to tell people what to do in order to get there. So on my team, every Monday we have a weekly stand-up where we actually go over everything we did last week. Each person gets 5 minutes, which is not a lot of time. But I basically have them say like, what are they on for the quarter? What are they forecasting? We've gotten granular enough where now they say, these are the amount of opportunities I created last week. Here's what I qualified. Here's what I closed lost. Here's what I'm booking this week. Here's what I'm booking next week. And I think that just having them having a forcing function of checking Salesforce to make sure that those things are in line has helped a lot of them understand, oh, I can feel okay about this quarter, or, oh crap, I thought I had more pipeline than I actually did. So that's like one piece. On Wednesdays, we do big deal review. We just start in the order of the largest deals. And I actually don't talk. I still probably talk more than I should in those calls because I can't help myself sometimes. But I always try to start off by asking the team, like, okay, what questions do we have for this person? Let's poke holes in this deal and learn from each other, and, let some of the more tenured members of the team share why they would do something or not do something. So those are like the weekly meetings that we have where everyone has to like kind of show their stuff in front of each other and talk about it. I don't know if other companies do this, but I have matured to this. A year and a half ago, we had a new CRO and he was very much like, we don't have enough pipeline. And he was right. Like we didn't. And no one was talking about it. And we were like, why are we not hitting our numbers? And the reality is we just didn't have enough pipeline. And there were expectations for AEs, but no one was hitting them. So that was like a wake up call for me. I was like, he's totally right. And I don't even know what my pipeline coverage ratio should be. So we like got that number and I just leaned into that. So I started off by telling my team, the SMBA team, you got to make X number of calls every week in order to get into the inbound lead rotation. So basically, if you miss that number that week, you don't get inbound leads the next week. So we saw an improvement, but the reality was like some people were making so many calls and booking no meetings. And I was like, okay, well, this is not helpful. So then I changed it maybe 6 months ago to you have to generate at least $10,000 minimum in new pipeline every week, which sounds like a low number, but over the course of the quarter and how our channels work, that is fine for AEs. And then same thing, like I would have some people pipe one deal that's like 3 times that amount, and then that deal will go close lost, and there was just like no added benefit. So now, maybe 3 months ago, we switched to like, you got to generate 3 new opportunities every week. And I will say most of the team hits it every week. And then the weeks where they don't, when they, like the people who did hit it, just have an awesome week of inbound meetings that they get on their calendar. And I'm the only team that does this at Envoy, and I'm very transparent about it with the team. But I mean, I get people working till 8 p.m. on Fridays sometimes, which is what I used to do in sales. trying to get into the router because they want those meetings the following week. And I think if I just done that like right away, I would have had a lot of upset in my team. But I think the people who are consistently hitting their number, it's not an issue. And even if they miss 1 week, they're fine. Like they have enough pipeline. It's more for the people who need to catch up and kind of see like, okay, I need to put in a little bit more work, or I need to be more strategic about the people I'm reaching out to.
Huge fan of that. I always like to study, there's like a big public software company that's like famous for like inbound leads got routed based on close rate. And it's like, okay, that's great. But if it's more pipeline, and you know, that's probably built for a more inbound rich environment, right? But like the same idea, which is like, hey, if you're doing the right behaviors and it's working, like this isn't about pure equality here. Like I want everyone to have the opportunity, but your job is to maximize the pie, right? So I love that. One thing you mentioned that is a common thing in a bunch of organizations I speak with, and I've lived through it as well, is, you know, you mentioned the first 3 years of your journey was pretty inbound heavy, right? I think you guys caught some awesome tailwinds with where you were positioned with COVID, right? And then had to go more outbound heavy. What was it like trying to switch more of the inbound wiring for reps to this, hey, we're not that anymore, right? Like this is an outbound culture. You just gave a great concrete example of like, you know, you don't get on the router unless you generate X amount of pipeline. Did you find that those reps with the inbound experience like could make the switch over to, hey, this is the new Envoy? Or did you have to bring in a lot of fresh new talent that had different backgrounds?
Honestly, it was mixed. We had some AE, and I'm speaking more broadly on the AE side, but even as a BDR leader at the time, I feel like a lot of the AEs were like, oh, the stuff the BDRs are booking is crap. Like their sales cycle is 6 months. I want it. When you do outbound, it is longer. Like that is just how it works. And
bigger, but longer.
Yeah, bigger but longer. And I don't think everyone understood that. So, I mean, we lost some people over the years because they just couldn't get the motion. And actually, the guy who brought me to Envoy, he and I would talk about this a lot. Like there are some AEs that like every 2 years, they leave a company and they go to a new company. And it's because it's inbound and it's like an easy sale. It's like warm people who already know your company and they're like interested and they're in an evaluation process. And that's just not the case. So it's tricky. And I think that this is what I take on as my mission as the leader of SMB is my job is to make sure that my team can close inbound leads great, but also when times are tough, they actually know and have the skills to go find the outbound and close their own business. And we've actually seen a massive lift in the last 2 quarters compared to this 4 before that of how much of our pipeline that is closing is actually sourced by us. A lot of our largest deals are now sourced by us because we've gotten smarter both on the expansion side and on the like account profile of who we should be going after. But it's not easy. And I think until an AE sees that, it's, you know, it clicks. But if I was a direct seller right now, I'd much rather be busy and like having lots of conversations regardless of how warm they are than just hoping that I get another inbound lead that wants to buy for the exact amount I need to hit my quota. So it's hard. I think it's hard, but I think this is why I'm so tough on my team. I want them to be adaptable in future environments because who knows what's going to happen. I mean, COVID
100%.
kind of showed that to all of us.
Yes. You mentioned, you talked about how you used some of the cadences in the early days. You walked through without explicitly stating some of your kind of operating cadence. Hey, here's what we do on Mondays. Here's the big deal review on Wednesday. Here's how we change routing based on previous week's results. What else do you think are some critical parts in that operating cadence or like overall playbook that is a part of your play that maybe some people don't spend enough time on?
Yeah. So I have a dashboard of all the different places where I think people can find opportunities. So it includes marketing campaigns. It includes event outreach for events that were upcoming. It includes like, hey, these customer accounts you have not talked to in the last 90 days, both unmanaged and managed by CS. Has things like Champify on it. It has intent data from G2 and ZoomInfo. And I manage that list. So I think you asked me once, like, why is your team adopting Champify more than others? Because every couple of days, and I operate off of Todoist. Like my husband actually put me onto this like checklist platform because I used to make like 8,000 checklists. The nice thing is you can set up recurring reminders. So like every 4 days, every 4 work days, I have an alert that's like review all the Champifies. And if anyone has more than like 5, I'm pinging them. And I'm like, hey, can you please work these Champifies today? And they have all their resourcing, right? Like they have their sequences because we use outreach. They have the sequences to go put those in, and then I expect them to call. But I'm the manager that's like asking, hey, why have we not followed up on this? Or can we follow up on this? I do that with deals too. I'm like pretty cutthroat, especially now it's end of quarter. If we don't have next steps set with a deal, it's out of this quarter's pipeline until you get a next step, and then I'll pull it back into this quarter. And that's important because I pull pipeline coverage ratios every Friday, and anyone who's below the threshold, they get call blocks on their calendar from me, which is also something I've gone back and forth doing. But last QBR, like you could see the week I added the call blocks and the output went like this. So that, I mean, it's uncomfy, but it works. So that's why we do it.
100%. 100%. Like, yeah, all this stuff you're saying, like if you're listening to this, people are like, this doesn't sound like rocket science. It's like, it's not, but it's hard, and you do it every week, and you do it every 4 days, and you have that conversation, and you're fine saying, hey, you're out of the inbound router. And like that, those behaviors compounded over a long period of time is what allows your org to do this, and people get promoted. So I really, really respect how you approach it. And I'm not surprised that you have a ton of reps that really, maybe in the beginning are like, holy shit, this is intense. But I'd imagine towards the end, they're like, I like this. I'm learning. Like, you're someone that has my back trying to help me be successful. So I really respect how you,
it's winning. I want them to win. Like it is not fun being in sales if you're not winning. Like, that's not fun. You know, it comes from a place of support and love and passion. I would say I'm like passionate about pretty much everything I do in life. And sometimes they hate me. Sometimes they're like, this really sucks.
Just hopefully it's only a little hate or short.
It's like temporary. And then the next day I'll join a call and help them close the deal, and then it's fine. But I think that's why it's so important to be in the weeds, right? If you want to make change, your team has to trust you.
What else have you done to keep the culture fun? I think this is even more important with the younger generation of sellers, right? I agree with you. I think people are like, well, here's a clear promotion path. Yes, you need that. Or like, here, you take off a Friday when everyone hits their numbers. Sure. I think at the end of the day, it's just winning. But like, what else have you done to keep the culture fun, growth oriented, inclusive? Anything else you do?
Well, we're in the office 4 days a week. Obviously, I have reps in Denver and SF and London. So I try to travel to the other offices, but I'm in the office every day with the people in the Denver team. Not today. Fridays are like day from home. So that's one thing I just think helps with culture, because you get to know each other and you get to have lunch together and you can go out for drinks whenever you want after work. Believe it or not, we didn't have a bell. I always thought every sales company had a bell. We didn't have a bell until like 6 months ago, and it has totally changed the vibe of like getting a deal in. So I think that's been really helpful. Like, big or small, we always are trying to celebrate those wins in all of our offices. And then we do team events. So like in July, I took my team to this place in Denver called Beat the Bomb, where we had like 4 challenge rooms. We were collecting time, and then we had to like play this video game where everyone had like one function of a controller, and then you get sprayed with paint at the end. So we did that. So we try to do like fun things. It's funny. I feel like this generation that was like very social. Like, I'll try to have everyone over. I've had my team over to my house twice, and it takes like 4 months of planning because everyone
very
has,
social
like,
or very anti-social. Oh,
well,
their social calendars.
They have
full.
a lot of plans, and then they also have a lot of like, I do gym at 4 o'clock, like not 4 because that's part of the work day, 6 o'clock on Monday. So every Monday is out. Like, that is never like anything that's ever been part. Like, I'll change those types of things, but coordinating those things has been tricky. So, and then I think Envoy does a lot of great stuff. We have Bonusly, so we have pineapples we can give to everyone every single month, which I think just helps with the team culture as well. Yeah. I feel very fortunate for working with my team. So,
yeah, I mean, like, I'm really happy we did this just because we dove into the topics I wanted to, really around accountability, and you had awesome details and anecdotes about how you approach that. And I think there's a lot for people to learn from this because, you know, before we hit recording, I'm like, everyone's like, oh, there's some magical tool or some new AI. It's like, the reality is the big gains is in all the stuff you're talking about. And I firmly believe that. And I'm happy we had the chance to do this episode. My last question for you, Jade, is you've been doing this a while now, right? Some of my peers that are in similar situations are like, man, like another quarter, I'm doing this again. Like, it was good in the beginning. I can make some pretty quick money if you're in tech sales and figuring it out. What keeps you humming? What keeps you motivated?
Oh gosh, a lot of things. Like I said before, I don't do anything unless I care a lot about it. And I think part of that's just like how I want people to perceive me. But I also just think that's like has been my innate like DNA, I think, since I was a kid. And I'll give my parents some credit, but like, I'm very different from my siblings. So I don't think that's the only factor. I like winning and I like seeing progress and change. I think one thing I've realized working at Envoy is that this is the perfect size company for me because I have the ability to manage and work with the team. I have the ability to make change that actually is like impactful, and I can see that. And I have visibility to leadership, which I love Envoy's leadership. It's been really great. Our CEO and our CFO have been here since before I started. So it's just been really great to like watch us grow as a company. But I don't know. I like working. I love working. Both kids I have, it's like I'm ready to go back to work. So
Jade, this is awesome. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy metric-filled days to do this. Where can people find you if they have questions or want to dig a bit deeper about what you talked about?
yeah, on my LinkedIn, I think is probably best.
Cool, everyone. Jade Campbell at Envoy. I really appreciate it, Jade. Have a great weekend, and thanks so much for the time.
Thanks, Todd.
All right. Thanks for listening to Cracking Outbound. If this was helpful, let us know by messaging me, Todd Busler, on LinkedIn, and share this episode with a friend that you think will be interested. If you want more resources about building and scaling all things outbound, you can sign up for our newsletter at champify.io/blog.